Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 227 of the NC DWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, I have Josh Barron on the podcast. Josh practices in Utah. He formerly did civil litigation before moving into criminal law, so he shares that journey. But Josh is a master of referral-based marketing. We spend a lot of our conversation today talking about referral-based marketing at Josh's prompting. Wouldn't you love a book on the business of criminal law? Well, that is the title of Josh Barron's book, The Business of Criminal Law, How to Build a Practice You and Your Clients Will Love. We talk a lot today about really being invested in your clients' cases and how Josh stays present during his conversations with clients. A lot of practical wisdom shared on that end, but I just ordered my copy of Josh's book, had a blast of a conversation talking with Josh. I've done a couple of interviews this past week now with out-of-state lawyers. I love having conversations about the business of criminal defense. And so it's always great to get perspective from people that are practicing in other jurisdictions, taking notes during both of these conversations recently. And it's got me juiced up for discussing nothing but the business of criminal defense at next month's Freedom Fighters Summit, where that will be the topic of conversation. How do we become better branders of our law firm? How can we better promote and market our firm? How is AI impacting law? How do we become better legal leaders? How do we improve the client experience? How do we improve our firm culture? How do we become better contributors to our community? These will be the topics of conversation at next month's Freedom Fighter Summit. And based on these past two conversations, I am just absolutely juiced to be in a room full of lawyers focused on improving their criminal defense brand, as well as their law firms, their teammates, and a room full of their teammates as well. So very pumped about that, but love this conversation with Josh and hope you do the same. Josh, I am super excited to have you on the podcast. Kind of have connected here just recently over Facebook, but definitely a shared interest in the intersection of criminal defense and business. And so pumped to dive into this with you. As I was preparing for the podcast, I have got my latest reading scheduled for me here, The Business of Criminal Law by Josh Barron. So I'll include a link to the book in the show notes. But yeah, definitely excited to get that in my hands. I was kind of reading like the description of that, and I was like, I'm all in on this. So I'm pumped about that, but very excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. And yeah, this is my favorite topic. So I'd love to
same. Yeah, no, same. Well, I guess before we kind of dive into some of maybe the like marketing specific questions, what kind of led you down the path of law school? Like how did that happen? And then ultimately I saw that you were in civil litigation first. What kind of got you into the criminal space?
It was, I wish I had a good reason for being a lawyer. It was just kind of process of elimination, avoidance of math, just really bad reasons. There's no lawyers in my family. I graduated from college early. And so I was just like I had a history degree and didn't find that to be particularly marketable, so I knew I had to go to graduate school and there's no math on the LSAT. And so just kind of figured, yeah, I mean, that sounds like that'll be good. And yeah, so jumped into law school and kind of hated it and hated all of my hated all of my jobs during law school. I just thought like lawyers seemed pretty miserable, you know. And then yeah, just kind of ended up kind of over time not really planning to go into criminal defense and definitely not being a solo, lawyer and then kind of a small firm lawyer, but it's kind of where it's led me and I really enjoy my life. Like I enjoy my practice and I feel really privileged to be able to do what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's definitely a kind of somewhat shared journey on my side of things. Law school was not really in the picture until the last year of undergraduate. I had a degree in philosophy, and it was like, well, nobody's getting paid to sit on a rock, so I better figure out like what the next step is. And law was kind of just that just seemed like a good next step. So there wasn't really
Yeah.
much of like a, desire to become a lawyer before that, or, any real path. Once I got into law school of specific practice area, I worked with a local real estate attorney here in Asheville during a summer internship. And I was like, he seems to have a good business. So that sounds like something worth going after.
Yeah, it's
But
funny how like until you start doing something, it's hard to know what it's like. And
it is.
so
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody would plan their career.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and before you got into law school, I had kind of asked you briefly about this during the kind of conversation we had before we started recording, but you did like a year of church-based mission work. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Chile, 2 years in Chile.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's intense. It's intense. It's very full time. It's not 40 hours a week. It's just like every waking moment. It's very structured. But yeah, it was an awesome experience and learned Spanish and a
Yeah,
ton of
that's a
my
super, super great skill to learn. I mean,
yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah, a ton of my clients speak Spanish and we're doing more immigration stuff now. And so that was awesome. But yeah, it was my first time living away from home. And when in our church, when you serve this kind of mission, you're assigned a companion and you are with that companion 24 hours a day. And they have these transfers every 6 weeks. So if you're with somebody, it's going
Is
to be
he
at least
dead or
six
not?
weeks. Right. It's at least 6 weeks, but it could be 12 or even 18 weeks that you're together. And for a long time, I was like, man, I have a lot of bad companions. Then I realized that they all had me for a companion, that I was the common denominator. And I realized I was a pretty tough companion. I was tough to
Yeah.
be around. But no, it was a great experience and very difficult, very challenging, but very glad I did it.
Yeah, I think that is such a cool, uh, I don't know, like kind of how that's couched in terms of like requirement, but such a cool thing to kind of do at an early stage in life, that
Yeah.
that mission-based work where it's kind of like you really don't have another great opportunity to be doing something like that,
Yeah.
round the clock. And so it's such a cool aspect of the kind of church faith to
Yeah.
have that be something like, hey, we're gonna really really encourage us to be
Yes.
part
Strongly
of the
encourage it.
church
That's
life.
right.
So I think that's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Spanish side of things, I feel like when you're doing any work with clients that speak another language, and I think for a lot of criminal defense lawyers across, the state here and obviously across the country, like Spanish is definitely like probably at the top of the list next to English. It's just such a different trust factor
Yeah.
when you're speaking the same language. So I mean,
Yeah.
again, like that's such a huge, huge advantage point. Like anytime I see an attorney in the courtroom speaking Spanish, it's like, there's just a different level of trust that they
Yeah.
have with that client. And I'm
Yeah.
doing my best through our interpreters to like use body language and, make sure it's like, hey, I'm on your team, but it's hard to do with that language barrier for sure.
Can I tell you an embarrassing story about Spanish?
Yes.
When I first started my practice, I got hired by the family of this guy who's being charged with stabbing somebody. And so I went to meet with him at the jail after the family hired me. And I was like, in Spanish, I was like, okay, so what happened? And he said, like, the first thing he said is like, okay, tenía una navaja, which means I had a knife, but he's using like a Mexican slang word for knife. And I did not know that word. In Chile, they say cuchillo. And so I was like, navaja, what? What's a navaja? Like, and it took him like 5 minutes to explain to me what a navaja was. And it did not inspire confidence in my client that my Spanish was bad enough that I didn't know his word for knife. But I never have forgotten that word for knife. And now if my clients ever use it, I'm ready, ready to rock.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean it is. It's just such a big deal to have that connection point. And yeah, I mean it's for us that's really like a big focal point is trying to figure out like how to have that attorney legal assistant kind of conversation jointly and how to communicate like everything is very important, like
Yeah,
don't miss anything because we want to make sure that we're not later down the road like having the client be like I told you about this and it's
right.
like oh this is the first time I'm hearing it kind of situation. So it's really important to have that
Yeah.
camaraderie.
Right. And I think it gets to like what our clients are buying when they hire us.
Yes.
Because there was a time, so my business partner retired in 2017. And so then I kind of had to like reevaluate my practice and what kind of practice did I want to have. And so we did this net promoter score survey. I don't know how familiar you are with net promoter score. It's a one question survey.
Okay.
How likely would you be to recommend us to a friend or family member? So I had this paralegal run our net promoter score survey, and she comes back and she says, well, we got like a 14. And I was like, okay, is that good? I didn't really know that much about it at the time. And she was just like started edging out of my office without really like she didn't want to tell me. It was a really bad score. It was in the range of like what Comcast gets. Like I hate Comcast. And um and so when I got that, I was like, I'm getting my clients really good results. Why do they all hate me so much?
Yes.
Like some of them affirmatively like hated me, but like we're like, I can't switch attorneys now. It's too late, but I hate you. And what I realized is that when they're hiring us, they really can't, it's very difficult for them to project or predict whether we can win, quote unquote, their case. So what are they buying? And like what makes them hire me today and not a month ago? And what I realized is it's the feeling of
Yes.
he's got it.
Yeah.
I don't have to be stressed out about this anymore. He's on top of it. I can sleep now. And so once we realized that, then we just tried to like explicitly give that experience. So like in an initial consultation, instead of holding back like some strategic idea I have about their case, I just try to like really be present with them and try to help them feel like I understand what's important to them. I have a plan to make it happen. And they a lot of times are just like, oh, I'm so relieved. And that feeling of going from super anxious and stressed out to being like, ah, it's a little bit better. That's all I want. And then once they feel that, they go, I want more of that. And of course, I deliver a great result. But again, they can't, it's too hard for them to tell which attorney can get them that result. And so I
Yes.
have to focus on delivering that actual concrete value as early as possible in the initial consultation, if possible. And you're right. If I can speak Spanish to a Spanish speaking client, I'm 5 steps ahead.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think, it's interesting that you use that word presence. We were just having one of our former employees came back to do lead one of our weekly team huddles yesterday, and he was kind of focused on customer experience, client
Mm,
relations. And one of the things that came out in that is you got to be very present in the
yeah.
conversation. And I think that's such a huge leg up because of this guy right here, the
Right.
the smartphone. It's really hard to find yourself in a conversation, like a meaningful conversation with somebody else. Everybody always seems distracted. They're like looking at their computer, their
Yeah.
phone, they're like in and out of conversations. So that presence word like really stuck out to me. Do you have anything like specific that, is part of like being present with a client? What does that look like in the consultation, whether it's in the office, over the phone? Like how do you communicate that presence?
Well, I'm going to tell you a bad example and then a good example. So a bad example for me is sometimes I'm on Facebook while my client's talking. Like
Yes.
DUI stories are all the same. Do you know what I mean? Like,
we were literally just talking about this. I'm laughing about it. So
it's just like I cannot hear them tell me one more time that they passed the field sobriety test and the cop was such a jerk and like the reason they were drinking that day is because they got in a fight with their boyfriend. Like I don't like so sometimes but what I've actually found though is like there are only so many consultations I can do in a day. I
yes.
didn't know that for a long time. I thought I could do, if each one takes a half hour and I have 8 hours in a day, I can do 16 consultations.
Yeah.
I can't. I
Yeah.
can, four is kind of a lot for me.
Yeah.
4 in one day is a lot. And so so like one thought is if I notice myself not being present, a lot of times rather than beating myself up about it, I just say, what is making it so that I don't have energy to do this right now? And it might be
Interesting.
because I
Yeah.
have too many consultations that day, or I was doing too much court plus consultations, or maybe I didn't eat lunch yet, or like it takes energy to be present. And
Yes.
I don't have limitless energy. And if I notice my energy is going away, rather than feeling guilty that my energy is gone, like let's just address that energy. Let's try to bring that back up. So I do sometimes notice myself on Facebook, but I've tried to be less guilty about it and more just to notice it and call it out and be like, oh, I wasn't that present during that consultation. I was on Facebook. That's not great.
Yeah. That's so
Um,
powerful.
the other thing that I've been trying, kind of as like, I kind of got the idea for meditation, although I despise meditating. I've never been a good meditator. I should probably eventually learn how to do it, but one of the things I like in meditation is to just notice when your attention drifts and just patiently, without judgment, just redirect it back where you want it to be. And so I know that like we like people who like us. We're going to hire people who like us. And it's exhausting to pretend to like someone. So
Yes.
instead of pretending to like something I've tried to do is during the initial part of the consultation, try to notice something that I genuinely, sincerely admire about the person. Like they might have made tons of mistakes, done things I wouldn't do, but they come and maybe they say, "Look, I screwed up. I committed this domestic violence offense, blah blah blah." But I want to be able to provide for my kids. Like that's the biggest priority. I got to keep my job. My kids have these needs. I've got to take care of them. And so now I can have a choice when I'm doing the consultation to focus on the mistakes he made, or on the fact that he's really focused on his family and his parenting and his kids. And if I notice, so I might say, this guy cares about being a good father. He may not be a perfect father, but he cares about being a good father and he's trying. And then when I notice my attention drifting to how much money is he going to pay me, or what am I going to do after this, or what movie should I watch tonight, or man, this guy's such a jerk. I would never have done that to my wife. I just try to patiently, without judgment, bring my attention back to this guy, despite all of his imperfections, cares about his family and he's fighting for his family. Bringing it back to that just has helped me be more sincere when I say, hey, I really admire how much importance you're putting on your family. Like at this, you could be focused on a lot of things right now and you chose to focus on that. And so good for you. And I can fight for that. So
Yeah.
that
That's
that's been a
awesome.
little bit helpful. It takes energy. Like, so I can't do that in 20 consultations a day, but I can do it in 3 or 4 consultations in a day. And when I do, it feels more fulfilling and it feels like I'm serving them in that meeting.
Yeah, I love that. I think again, just like a particular word that stuck out to me in that in terms of connection to presence was attention and noticing when your attention is drifting. And I think that as a business owner, a lot of the focus is how do I get a client to notice me? How
Mm,
do I make my ad slightly different? How do I feel different on the phone? How do I grab that client's attention? That's what we're all trying to do. We're in this like game of seeking attention from
mm,
clients, so that they will come in and talk to us and then hopefully hire us. But you kind of don't think about the flip side of the clients. Like I want somebody's attention on me. Like I want to
yeah,
find the right lawyer that's basically I've got their attention. They're not missing anything. They're hearing my full story. They have,
yeah,
I've made sure that whatever stumbling blocks there might be, I've put it in their court. They know about it. And that way, like, again, I can offload that problem. But it really starts with attention. And every time I think about attention, it's always like, how can I be the one who is got your attention, and
Mhm.
not really from the flip side. So I
Mm.
love that kind of refocusing tool of how do I make sure that I'm communicating attention, because you can totally feel it when you're losing
Yeah.
somebody's attention. So from a client's
Yeah.
perspective, it's like, this is a bad situation.
Yeah. I mean, so I think like just focusing on them, it's a service, it's a kindness, that you can do for that person. I had a consultation recently that's kind of like, I'm not sure how to get back to it. It's not common. It was kind of a unique consultation, but I had this consultation with a client. It was for like a protective order violation. So it had been kind of a domestic violence relationship. They'd separated, she got a protective order, and then he may have violated the protective order and said some unkind things to her. And so I'm doing the consultation with him, and he's just not being realistic. Like he read me the text. You know what I mean? This isn't really a what happened case. It's like a what needs to happen now? What's the punishment? What's appropriate? And so I think a lot of times in the past, I might have maybe even been a little bit insincere and been like, "Hey, man, yeah, that's so horrible. Like, how dare they think that you violated the protective order?" And like, it just wasn't true. It wasn't how I felt. And
Yeah.
so for some reason, I had courage that day, and I said, "Well, like, let me kind of push back slightly on what you just said, and let me just give you like some words. And I don't want you to like repeat them if they're not true, but if they feel good, maybe they'd be helpful to you." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "What if you said it like this? What if you said, I'm not proud of how I spoke to her that day. It was not right and it wasn't kind. And that's not the person I want to be. But I wasn't violating the protective order because of these procedural issues with the protective order." And he like started crying, not weeping, but he had like tears in his
Yeah.
eyes. And he said, "It's like you went into my brain and took that out. Like you said something that I wanted to be able to say, but I didn't know how to say it." And I was like, "Okay." Like, so now the trust is like, it's like cemented. Like we've known each other for 25 minutes, but he's like, "You get me," And I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh." And so that case went super smoothly. We got him a great result very quickly. And I think that if I'd been less courageous in the initial consultation, it would have taken us like months longer to get to a plea agreement because he was kind of still in this denial moment.
Yes. Yeah.
So trying to be more sincere. My sister's a social worker, and she went to this training recently that's they were talking about burnout among social workers. And they were saying that a lot of times people think like having too much empathy opens you up to burnout. And they said, actually, the research is that empathy it's not exhausting, it's energizing.
Mm.
What is exhausting is insincerity. When you're trying to fake that you like this person or fake that you agree with them, it's exhausting. It takes a ton of energy.
It is.
But actually, like having compassion for them, it's compassion fatigue is a misnomer. It's actually not compassion, it's fake compassion fatigue. And so in this consultation, I was able to be present with him, but actually express my real feelings and my real vision, what I was seeing. And I left that consultation. I was like, let's do 10 more. That was awesome. That was
Yeah,
so
that is
fun.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like in the DWI context, that, that feels, kind of similar to when somebody, calls in and, clearly things are going sideways in their life. It's like, I had 10 beers and, wrecked my car, but you know, the officer, didn't know I was the one driving and, was rude to me and all of these things, and just gets like fixated on this. And there is this kind of moment, like you were just speaking about, where it's like, look, we're going to hold the state's feet to the fire if they're not jumping through the, constitutional barriers the correct way, and doing everything that they're supposed to do from an investigation standpoint. And it really is, not a good situation when government actors aren't acting professionally. Like that's all a problem. But we've also got to like address this underlying issue and kind of get to the root of the problem if you want to avoid this kind of situation in the future. And I do think that there, especially earlier in practice, and there is even still like this tension there now, where it's like, do I kind of call out, like maybe in that same sense, call out this behavior, because we do really have like an opportunity for change in this moment.
Mm.
Like there's
Yeah.
a opportunity to kind of move in a different direction. And when you kind of see that, you gotta, if possible, I think help the client seize that moment, because it may not come again. It may like be
Yeah.
fleeting. Like, they may a couple of days later just be like, I got screwed, and
Yeah.
this was, not my fault. And like, all of these ways that we're really good at kind of coming up with defense mechanisms for ourselves. But I love that example that you just gave.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's not something that I can repeat on demand. Like you said, it kind of requires the client to be open to it. But yeah, I'm since having that experience, I've tried to be more alert to that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, to kind of flip or switch gears a little bit here in terms of kind of attorney, marketing, and kind of criminal defense specific marketing. You had sent me over ahead of our call this advertising matrix that you've come up with, and so I wondered if, and I'll include like an image with the link, but would you mind just kind of describing what that is, and then kind of
Yeah.
what your takeaways are from that?
Yeah. So I made this little kind of decision, little matrix. That sounds so fancy. It's 4 boxes. I guess it's technically a matrix, but so I made it kind of to help us think about evaluating like advertising opportunities. Because
Yes.
like I don't know about you, I get 10 emails probably. I almost said 10 emails a day, at least 5 emails a day
Yeah,
that are
same.
like
Yeah.
SEO people, pay-per-click people, all these different advertising opportunities. So the question is, how, like what we're looking for is a model that we can repeat for a long time where we put X in and we get more than X out, right? Like that's what we're all searching for. So you could call that the business model. We're searching for a business model, and until we have it, like you can't look for anything else. Like, don't be streamlining your intake process. Don't be working on your forms for motions to suppress. Like, don't be efficient, making that efficient. Like the limiting factor is, do we have a model where we put X in and we get more than X out? Until we have that model, we can't do anything else, right?
Yes.
So so I just thought like one way to look at advertising opportunities would be to say, what is the cost to experiment? And if I won, how easy would it be to protect the advantage?
Hmm.
So the reason that we want to be careful of high cost to experiment options is that they might put you out of business. You're kind of betting your company sometimes. So like if you're a small criminal defense firm and you're hoping to do $200,000 in revenue in a year, and somebody approaches you about a billboard on a major highway and it's going to be $5,000 a month, like you don't have that much margin to play with. And if it works, great. But if it doesn't work, you're like done. You're out of business. You can't try anything else. So we probably want to focus on low cost to experiment options. And so if we're choosing between, so an example to me of a bad option because it's high cost is anything that's awareness based.
Right.
Awareness takes too long, it takes too much commitment, and it takes too much initial spend. Like I really worry, like if you're going to be a personal injury firm that's going to advertise on billboards, in my view, you've got to be like number one or number two or not do it.
Yes.
There's
Yeah.
no point in
100%.
being
Yeah.
the fifth spender on
Yeah.
billboards. Like it's very expensive, right?
Yeah.
So we want to avoid those kinds of high cost options.
We were just
Um,
kind of talking about that, like attention seeking nature. Like that's the
oh, right.
for potential client, like you're trying to get their attention. And yeah, if you're one out of every 50 billboards, and there's two other firms that are like, 8 out of every 50 billboards, you're probably not getting much of that like
Right.
awareness,
You got zero.
value.
You
It's just
spent
like literally
X and you
money,
got zero.
money down the toilet. So yeah,
Right.
100% agree with that.
So then something that's lower in cost, and so it's in my view kind of better on the spectrum, but maybe not ideal, is direct response ads. So to me, AdWords is better than a billboard because I can do an experiment in AdWords, and if it doesn't work, I'm not like bankrupt.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that AdWords is perfect or it's great for everybody or if it can't fail. but it can fail in a way that doesn't cripple you. So you can try stuff. And so, like my firm, we kind of started out sending direct mail to people who'd been charged with a crime. So actual physical letters that was permitted, still is permitted in Utah, as long as you market advertising material on the outside and all these things. So we
That
did,
was my first form of advertising, the
it
direct
worked
mail.
great.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
So what was nice was it cost us, $200 to send 200 letters in a day. And if no one hired us, we weren't going to go out of business because of $200. So it was really nice. And then we kind of graduated to AdWords, and there was a time when we were spending like $35,000 a month on AdWords. It was very expensive, and we got a return on it. But the challenge with AdWords and letters and other low cost, potentially, helpful advertising channels is that they tend to not be very defensible.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I could be number one on Google this month, spend $35,000. Then if I lower my bid slightly, the next month I'm not like showing up at all.
Yes.
Like, so I won this month. It doesn't help me win next month, other than it helps me make money, right? So it's not like an accumulating advantage over time. So to me, the magic kind of channel that gives you the advantage, gives you like a defensible advantage and is inexpensive is referrals. I love referrals. I love them so much. To this day, I'm like slightly, I feel guilty saying this. We still do a little bit of advertising. We still do a little bit of direct response advertising. And I'd love to shut it off, but it works so well sometimes. And it makes so much money that I can't shut it off. But I wish I had like the character to just be like, no, we're referrals only. So we're probably now, there was a time that we were like 90% advertising, and now we're probably like 20% of our 20% of our business comes through ads. But, we still get a ton of referrals. And what's nice about a referral is you spend a little bit of money and a little bit of time building a relationship with someone. And then no one can like buy that relationship from you. Like, especially if you're not like paying for referrals, like it's just like a sincere recommendation. Once you have a couple clients that go back to the referral source and say, he kicked butt, he was so great, he returned all my phone calls, he was wonderful, thank you so much for referring me to him. Once that happens, you're locked in. You've got a great relationship that until you ruin it, it's going to stay and you're going to get referrals from it. So to me, that's like the magic kind of nexus between it's low cost and low risk, but it's defensible. Coca-Cola can't just like buy all of my relationships. Like they can buy more billboards, they can buy more ads, but they can't buy the relationships that I built. So if some big firm decided to spend a bunch of money for some reason to do criminal defense, they'd have to start from zero and build new relationships. They're not going to take mine. I'm going to go to lunch with these people every few months. So I love referral relationships. And I think so that's part of the reason why they're low cost to start and they are defensible. They give you a strong moat.
Yeah. I think, when I started practicing, I kind of looked at other members in the local bar that had established practices. And I was like, man, none of these guys know how to advertise, like I'm going to go out there and kill it on the internet. And, you feel like you're killing it in the first couple of years when you get like 3 calls a week. You're like, man, I'm doing great, We're kicking butt. I don't know why is everybody else not doing this? And it's over time that I really started to be like, referral business, whether that's from prior clients, other attorneys in the community, other professionals in the community. I mean, the value is so tremendous there because the sales pitch is totally different, right? Like, I mean, literally it's just, you're just trying to come across as like a decent human being. And, if you do that, it's like you've got the client ready to sign because they've already trusting somebody else's recommendation. So the referral piece to me, like over time, it's just been that has really kind of like shifted focus and obviously like you just said like that because it's organic, like it doesn't turn off. Like, I mean, once you are in that business, you don't have to, you might have to pay to some extent with additional like time and energy to kind of like keep the relationship going. But in terms of actual dollars, that, that's such a valuable long-term gig. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's your, general process in terms of, establishing referrals or what have been some of the ways that you have seen attorneys find you, maybe on their own to kind of send business. How's that been? Um,
Yeah. So my grandfather is a pharmacist,
okay.
and he's just like a master natural networker. My dad is a teacher. He's a very different networker, but a master natural networker.
Okay.
And when I was first starting my practice, I wasn't getting any referrals and I was comparing myself to them and I was like, I'm just not as good. I must be terrible at this. Like, what's wrong with me? My grandfather is like the most thoughtful person. He sends thank you notes. He sends gifts when he's thinking of you. He clips out articles and sends them to people. The most thoughtful person. My dad is the least thoughtful person. He doesn't stay in touch with anyone. He's never written a thank you note. He does. And people who haven't seen him for years will be like, that's Josh Barron. His dad is amazing. Like they just love him. I don't know why. I hope he never tries to start a cult because it will work, you know. So my way is I love lunch. I don't
Yes.
like lunch. I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I don't like 8-person lunches. I don't even like 4-person lunches. I like one-on-one lunches. Love them. And so if you work for me, you have an unlimited lunch budget. If somebody wants to go to lunch with you, especially if they're like, so like 80% of our referrals come from other attorneys. So if it's a paralegal or a lawyer at another firm, buy them food, pay every time. I don't care. Like there's no amount we could spend on lunch that wouldn't, we'd get a great return on it. Like
Yes.
we
Yeah.
can't not, you know? And so what, so some people might hear that and say, well, then I have to be great at lunch. And I don't think that's true. Like, rather than saying, like, this is a really effective networking skill, and so I have to develop it and become good at it, I think it's way better to say, what is my natural, easiest way to build relationships with people? So, like, if you hate going to lunch and you hate writing thank you notes and you hate, like, becoming a cult leader or whatever my dad was doing, um, and you love serving on nonprofit boards and just like serving together and building relationships, do that. Give yourself a budget of time for that. If you love sending gifts, did you ever read the book Giftology?
Yes.
It-
That's great.
I love that book, but
Yeah.
like honestly, I'm not as big of a gift giver as I forget the guy's name that wrote that, but the guy, it's a great book.
John somebody, I think.
Yeah, great book. Love that book. I've given copies of that book away. We've tried to do gifting campaigns and they work fine, but like it's really not like I have, like that love languages book. Like I think we have natural kind of business love languages, and mine's lunch. Like if somebody I like wants to go to lunch, I'm so excited. It's not effort. It's not me dragging myself to that lunch. I love it. I enjoy it. I come away energized. I get ideas. It's great. And so I think that the way to build referrals is to find your sincere favorite way to do it. If you love writing thank you notes, write a million thank you notes. Give yourself time and a budget for that. Find kind of your referral love language and then just double, quadruple, quintuple down on that. Like really focus
Yeah.
on that.
That's
And don't beat yourself up about not doing stuff that other people do that works for them. Let them do that. That's fine.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so powerful. There's that kind of remind me of another good book that it's been now a few years since I've read it, but Never Eat Alone. I'm
Mm,
sure that's it's always about like about the lunch, like
yeah.
the like almost every day breakfast and lunch
Yeah.
date, so to speak. I mean, of having this like time with somebody else in that one-on-one setting, in terms of like helping other people on your team find their referral love language.
Mm,
What, if anything, have you guys tried? Because I do think that is, you know, I feel like trying to kind of communicate the importance and power of referrals to other team members is a lot more difficult when you're kind of not in the kind of owner mindset of like,
mm.
this is where some of our best leads are coming from. It's like, I'm doing my day-to-day stuff. How do you kind of build the kind of referral mentality into your teammates?
Well, I mean, like I think the first thing is we've got to make sure that we're incentivizing them. Like
Yes.
Like you said, that ownership mindset, like I want my associates to have an owner mindset. I want them to make more money if they bring in more cases. I don't want to have any cap on their bonuses or whatever. Like you have an unlimited lunch budget. If you're bringing in cases, you're going to make a lot more money. That's a very valuable task to me. So one is to line up compensation. But another is that dumb book. I've actually never read the book, but I have like taken some of the tests and quizzes and so that can be a fun way to like do it. And a lot of times I think like somebody who loves giving their spouse gifts, they love giving business gifts. Like
Yes.
a lot of
Yep.
times, whatever their love language is at home, that might be their most natural love language at work. The only one I haven't figured out how to do in a business context is physical touch. That seems kind of creepy, but maybe that's because I hate physical touch myself. But like, yeah, if you're a quality time person, do lunch. If you're a words of affirmation person, then write thank you notes. So yeah, I think
Yeah, that's great.
incentivizing, supporting it. I think a lot of times as owners, we say, I want you to build referral relationships. And then we like penalize our associates because they weren't billing or something during that time. And then they go, you say you want me to build relationships, but you really don't. You want me to work on all these dumb cases. And then they follow the incentives and they follow the feedback. So um, if we're going to, if we want them to do that, we have to budget money and time for it you know. So if we really wanted a new associate that was struggling with that, we might say like on Thursdays, you're not allowed to do any casework. You
Yeah,
just got to
that's
be writing
awesome.
thank you notes and going to lunch like that, you know. And and I find that like once you really kind of like let them like say, hey, there's not like a playbook where you have to do what I do, but you got to do something. A lot of times they find their thing and they go wild on it and they're making a ton of money for you.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I think that even just the emphasis on that in terms of time is so powerful because again, even though for us, we don't have like any billable hours. There are conversations where we say, here's how you maximize your kind of like dead time in the courtroom, and
Mm,
maybe bring a book to look at, some sort of CLE materials that you were given so that you can build that up. And really, again, that's like a very, very likely a missed opportunity to be networking with other attorneys,
mm,
also twiddling their thumbs in the courtroom, to be really going above and beyond with the client that's sitting in the gallery, where you could just go back and have a 20-minute conversation and talk about being present with somebody. That's just such a missed opportunity. But
mm,
again, can't really fault the, in our case, our attorneys, because it's like, the goal in that space is very like primarily like education. And so again,
mm.
maybe a thing personally to reevaluate. I really love that like emphasis on giving that time to make those connections happen.
Yeah, if you're sitting in court and you're a words of affirmation person, like write Google reviews for the other lawyers that are there. Like they'll
Yeah.
really appreciate it. They'll read
Yeah.
them. I promise you, they'll read them.
Yeah.
Like there's ways to, and if they're like, oh, that sounds horrible, then maybe we haven't found the right vocabulary for them yet.
Yes.
Like kind of going back to what I was saying before about like if I notice that I'm exhausted during a consultation, like if they're exhausted doing these activities and they're not repeating them, maybe we haven't found the right activities. Instead of trying to muscle through and force themselves to do this exhausting thing, do things that they already love doing that like energize them to do. And that'll repeat itself much easier than trying to force them to do something that's unnatural.
Yeah, one of the things that we've tried to do with, and I think a lot of businesses and law firms do this. Anytime that we get a referral, we send a thank you note to the
Mm.
referring attorney with a gift card. Do you guys have any like specific ways that you kind of reach out to, attorneys or other business professionals that are sending you a case, or a client that sends you a case? Is there a specific process for that?
Yeah, I try to have like stationery to do thank you notes and stuff like right around me. I have a typewriter in my office. Sometimes I'm like in the mood to type, and so I'll type
That's
out thank
awesome.
you notes. That's
That
fun,
is so cool.
But I found that the rate at which I send thank you notes, if I do it by hand, is like 20%, whereas it's like 80% if I just send a text. So
Yeah.
I don't think a text is as good as a handwritten thank you note, but I think a text is better than no
Yes.
acknowledgement that they've
Yeah.
sent it. So I try every time to ask the client for permission. Is it okay if I reach out to them and say thank you for sending the referral? And then like right there, right after our meeting, send a quick text or send an email, say, hey, thank you so much. This person contacted me and I appreciate that. It's funny how often somebody will say, oh, they loved you. Who was it? Mike something. And I, I don't know how to send a text to Mike. Like it's funny how often they can't tell me who exactly it was that referred. But when they do, I try to do some response. I try to be careful. We did gift cards for a while. It didn't work great for us. Um, I like for us, we didn't want it to seem in any way like a quid pro quo. Not because of bar rules. The Utah bar has actually gotten pretty chill about it now, especially if it's other lawyers. But like sometimes I think it can complicate it for the referral sender. Like
Yes.
if they
Yeah.
if they feel like they're getting, did I do it because I wanted the gift card or did I do it because I just thought this was the right person? So we've kind of gone away from that. We have done gifts that are kind of giftology based where it's kind of a surprise. Like one year we did we made these like custom cutting boards that were just like a really nice piece of wood. And then we had somebody engrave the name of each of the recipients on the cutting boards. So
Yeah.
it'd say
That's
like,
awesome.
the Minnick family or the Barron family. And people loved them. Like I wish I could send it every year, but like they only need one cutting board. I can't think of what to send them every year. That would be, but they loved it. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people really loved it.
Yeah.
So sometimes we'll do that, but we try not to connect it to a specific
Yes.
referral or like just to be like, hey, thank you so much. We've loved working with you this year and hope you had a great year. So we sent those out at Thanksgiving saying like, you can use this in your Thanksgiving dinner. And one story was like one of my law school classmates that I hadn't stayed in super close touch with called me and he said, you don't know this, but I make bread for my family every Sunday. And normally I put it on this cheap Walmart plastic cutting board. But for the rest of our lives, I'm going to put it on this beautiful cutting board that you sent us. And he sent me a picture of the bread that he'd made
Oh, that
that
is awesome.
Sunday.
Yeah.
I was like that felt really good to give to him, So
Yeah. That's so
so
great.
yeah, we try to look for gift opportunities, but it's been challenging. It's hard to give gifts and not. It's just there's a lot of subtlety in giving gifts. It's not always as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I think, sometimes I think part of the confusion on our end has been, do you send a gift card every time, even if like the client doesn't hire, or if it's like the
Yeah.
wrong type of case or whatnot. And, our general position has been like, we want to say thank you regardless, but that can
Yes.
become like this confusing thing. Cause then it's like, oh, they must have really wanted that type of case, and it's like, no, we didn't,
Right.
but so there's a little bit of, yeah, I think a roadblock even on that front. But yeah, I think the text mentality, I think is something that a lot of people I think will connect to, because sitting down and writing a thank you card really can feel like such a burden compared to a text message. We've started
Mm,
sending a fair amount of like um, requests for like a Google review through text
mm,
message versus email, because it's just easier. Like it's an easier form
easy.
of communication. So I think people are just kind of used to that being like the primary means of communication. And again,
Yeah.
you let somebody know that you're thinking about them. So I think that that's really good advice. If you also send a handwritten thank you card, great, but like at
Right.
least you get the text in. So
Right. Get that in first thing. Yeah.
yeah, love that. Well, as we are kind of like coming to a close, Josh, for like young law firm owners that are kind of 10 years or less in practice, what has been like some of the kind of big wins on your end,
Mm,
kind of big practice pointers, or kind of from a business perspective, big kind of business opportunities that kind of you saw in your own practice development.
hmm. What came to mind was a few years ago, a friend recommended a book to me, and I ordered the wrong book. Like I misheard the title, and the book I got was called Prosperous Coach.
Okay.
And it had this line that just I think about all the time. It said, open a relationship, not a transaction. And that's been like so great for me. Like rather than thinking like, how can I get something from this person? Like, let's just build a sincere relationship with this person, whether it's a client or another attorney. With clients, it's maybe a little bit more transactional for me because it's like they have court on Monday and they have to decide if they want to hire me. But especially with other attorneys or other people who might be potential referral sources, instead of being there and asking and, to just open a relationship, like I sincerely care about you. I think you're doing cool stuff. I admire you. And what can I do to further your career? And, and then people who reciprocate, like, let's collect those people. We love having those relationships and they're very fulfilling. Some of them never yield referrals and that's okay. Like they yield lots of intangibles, so I think that when we're too transaction focused, everyone can feel it. It's creepy. Nobody likes it. And if we can be relationship focused, it's very attractive to people and we don't have to beg or do weird things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that is such great advice. From the business end of things, and I think again, this like attention seeking and looking at different, kind of marketing opportunities that are out there, it really can become that like transactional mentality that kind of governs all decision making. But I think when you're putting the value on the other person, it's much more fulfilling practicing that way. Like, I mean, it's, anytime that you're, helping a client for the right reasons, you can tell that, like, you can feel it. Like, even sometimes when it's a strain, but it's like, you know, this really like didn't get entered right. I need to go fix this thing. It like
Yeah.
always feels better to go fix it because it's like, this was, this is what needs to happen. And I think, but we definitely, I think it was Simon Sinek. I was listening to a just a little blurb on LinkedIn the other day of him kind of talking about the just the dopamine hit that comes from helping somebody else, and like
Mm,
how like we're kind of wired to help people, like we're almost like rewarded for
mm,
that. And it just does feel good to have those connections that are yeah, just kind of focused on the right thing. I feel like you were talking about burnout a few minutes ago, and kind of, is it, this, emotion that's causing burnout, or kind of, not being properly empathetic to the client. But I think if you've got that almost like help first mentality, you'll just never get burned out doing
mm.
what you're doing. So I love that reflection.
Yeah, yeah. It makes practicing fulfilling. It's really enjoyable.
Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your wisdom. Again, I'm going to leave a link for the Business of Criminal Law book that Josh has written in the notes. If you have a client that needs help in the great state of Utah, then you know who to call. So so
I appreciate that. This was so fun. This is my favorite topic. So thanks for letting me talk about it today.
absolutely.